Why is Sisyphus happy? In short, we can say that's because he became the master of his fate, or he acknowledged and was aware of the fact that the world is absurd. But these short answers aren't convincing, mainly because they can't make us feel Sisyphus' joy from pushing the rock. So in this video, I would like to answer the question, why is Sisyphus happy again, starting with a summary of the history of European thought in the 20th century. Born in 1913, Camus was famously known for being an atheist. This fact is relevant. Since the late 19th century, the world has been changing, mostly as a result of the Age of Enlightenment. The economic model was changing, new inventions inspired by science were reshaping our way of living. To most people, these things marked a great progression of human conditions. Almost no one would question these advancements. But Max Weber, a famous German sociologist, was one of the intellectuals who were skeptical about these changes. Disenchantment of the world was how he would describe it. To him, the central characteristic of modernity is rationalization. People were turning to science from religion. Of course, there were obvious advantages to doing so. Our society became much more efficient and well-ordered. But there was also something taken away from us, as we no longer value the abstract emotions and aesthetics. The mystic aspects of life were fading out, and that's why the world was disenchanted. Another way to describe it is God is dead, a famous quote by Nietzsche. Nietzsche believed that the Age of Enlightenment had destroyed the traditional belief system in the West, which he mainly meant by Christianity. God was no longer relevant to intellectual thoughts. Science has arguably disproved the Christian metaphysics, and the new political system inspired by the Enlightenment thinkers had overthrown the church authority. In the past, God was like the court of final appeal, where people could find things like moral standards and meaning of life. But since God was no longer worshipped by almost everyone, the belief system had collapsed. If God does not exist, then everything is permitted, as many people quote Dostoevsky, though I could really never find the source. Anyway, this leads to the starting point of Camus' philosophy, nihilism. As God is dead, there is no one we can rely on to get answers to the hardest questions. Why do we exist? What's the meaning of life? God doesn't exist, and the world is simply chaotic. There is no intrinsic value in anything. The existence of all beings, including yourself, happened for no reason. This can be a quick summary of what we have seen so far, and is also the premises in the myth of Sisyphus. In the first chapter of the book, Camus said that the meaning of life is the most urgent of questions. Many times, Camus said Nietzsche was his most influential philosopher, and there is a common goal between their philosophical works: life affirmation, to say yes to life. As you might have heard, Camus' philosophy can generally be called Absurdism. But what does absurd mean? Who or what is absurd? Is it life, the world, or your very existence? In fact, it wasn't something that is absurd. The absurd lies in the tension between a rational being and the godless world. Let's begin with the first chapter of the book, the absurd reasoning. Human beings are complicated animals. Satisfying survival needs aren't enough for them. They also desire values and reasons. You can say these are their basic needs. But then, Camus analyzed the horrifying implications of holding a belief. When you believe in something, that means you think the world should be so. For example, when you say you believe in, say, equality, you will also mean the world ought to be equal. However, The world is silent. It will never respond to your wishes. The world is not as rational as you, and there is no God who can fix it or achieve your wish in heaven. If you wanted to look for any value or meaning in the world, you are doomed to fail. Absurdity is the tension between your wish and the silence of the world. People are always looking for meaning, and the world is always silent. The eternal gap between them is the absurdity. Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story is a good illustration. He thought he was a hero and wanted to fight some space villains, but soon he realized that he was just a toy, incapable of doing anything he always wished. It's not hard to imagine or remember the kind of absurd feeling that involves instant disappointment, like Buzz's story. But even when you are satisfied with the status quo, absurdity is still inescapable. Say, you are a middle-aged father working as a manager in some huge companies. You have a loving wife, your sons are doing well at school, and you earn a lot from a stable and rewarding work. Nevertheless, the question, what for, is still destined to pop up in your mind. Maybe someday when you walk past by the street and see buskers performing, you will ask yourself, shouldn't I play music instead of being a manager? Soon, you will find there is no certainty in any of your life choices, and what you are enjoying is not guaranteed or permanent either. It was at that moment the absurd has invaded you. Once you have experienced absurdity, it will never vanish, and there's nothing we can do with it. It seems that there are only two ways to respond, one of which is to commit suicide, because life does not seem to have any meaning, thus not worth continuing living. Obviously, this is not the mainstream choice. The second one was the one Camus wanted to challenge, to find new hopes. That can refer to many things, like believing in some religion or finding some reasons for your suffering. But no matter how healthy your dreams sound, they are still toxic in Camus' eyes. Given that the world is silent, any hopes are still false hopes. So far, Camus seems to have just made things worse. To suicide is surrender. To find new hopes is a useless escape. If everything is absurd, is any solution possible? Camus' answer is rather straightforward. He proposed the third choice, to embrace the absurd. What it meant is that we struggle against our cruel fate. Even though you know everything you do will ultimately return to nothingness, you still choose to live according to your will. You don't live for anything, but you just live loyally to your freedom and vitality. That is to say, you rebel against your doomed fate. By doing so, you become an absurd hero. Let's see how Camus illustrated his point with the myth of Sisyphus. In the myth, the human being Sisyphus was punished by the gods. As we all know, he had to push the rock up to the mountain again and again. The punishment is not just a physical one, but the mental torture of doing something fruitless forever. The scenario seems to be terrifying, but Camus invited us to take a closer look at one particular point, the moment when Sisyphus walked down from the top of the mountain, with a heavy yet measured step toward the torment of which he will never know the end. It is undeniable that the task is hellish. Of course, pushing the rock is not happy, especially for someone like Sisyphus, who enjoys the warmth on earth so much. But it's also this cruel fact that made his steps walking back to the foot of the mountain heroic. He was aware of his fate, and still he decided to carry on. Before understanding the philosophy, it's important to feel the beauty. I would like to explain this point in a short clip. It's a scene from a comedy anime, but I still think it illustrates the aesthetics of the struggling hero very well. In the anime, the protagonist Tonegawa somehow had to finish a bowl of oversized pork chop rice. The torture was meaningless, and you got nothing in return by doing so. But you can feel some remarkable vitality in his struggle. That's the same as Sisyphus. As he was going down the hill, he was conscious of his own fate. He was clear about the absurdity of life and did not rely on false hopes, like thinking he could leave hell by finishing pushing the rock. So what? All is well, Sisyphus would say. Like other tragic heroes, Camus celebrated. Sisyphus had already seen fate as a part of himself. Struggling with fate and absurdity is the same as struggling with your stomach. You have to eat at least twice a day. You spend a lot of time and money on it. But when you think your need to eat is something that has to be gotten rid of, you won't. On the contrary, you can become a gourmet. That's the logic of embracing the absurdity. Very often, the noble moments in life are not when you actually achieved something, but when you're involved in something passionately. It's important to note that Sisyphus wasn't happy after he went pushing the rock. The act itself won't bring any fulfillment. He was happy because he was a happy guy, an absurd hero, who had a clear view of the absurdity in life. That's the starting point of the story, not the end. It might be a bit misleading when Camus kept the catchy line, "One must imagine Sisyphus is happy," at the very end of the story. The myth was just an illustration of Camus' thought. In order to understand it, we still have to return to real-life situations. The setting in reality is clearly different. We are free agents who can choose how to act, and there are still open possibilities following our actions. The point of the myth is to tell us life is worth living, even if you live in a desperate world that never promised you anything. And the meaning of life doesn't have to rely on the world's response either. That makes sense. It's not hard to depend on the others to move on easily, but if you want to live out an ideal life, you are always on your own. You can win a team match by sticking with the hot shots, but that kind of victory doesn't mean anything. The true hero is the one who embraces the difficulties and struggles. As we have discussed earlier on, the absurdity is not on some specific things, but it's a tension between you and the world. So, the only way to deal with it is to change the way you see the world. There are many ways to express all is well like the absurd heroes. My present favorite is...
Oh shit, here we go again.
Or perhaps this is more relatable to Hong Kongers. But most importantly, it is the heroic figure of Sisyphus walking down the mountain that fascinated Camus the most. The myth is not the only example. We can always see the determined backs of the heroes in different kinds of works. The scenery is usually motivating, but sometimes they can also be touching. We can say Camus settled the question of the meaning of life by the aesthetics represented by Sisyphus. And that's why one must imagine Sisyphus is happy. That's the video. Thank you for watching to the end. We are Hong Kong Aesthetics, a literary magazine from Hong Kong. The script of this video is based on the presentation of our reading club activity on the book The Myth of Sisyphus. The reason we made this video is that we are hosting an activity on The Stranger soon, and we didn't want to repeat the presentation content while making it accessible to newcomers. Some may ask why we're doing this in English. Actually, the initial idea of starting up a channel is that we would like to make videos that promote Hong Kong literature and Chinese philosophy, because it's surprising to learn that there are no English YouTube channels on these topics that are run by native Cantonese or Chinese speakers. I hope we can try to make some of those videos soon, but maybe we'll do some content on Western classics too. So let's see what will happen at last. Thank you.